the Happy Prince. Once upon a time, in a bustling city, filled with towering buildings and busy streets, there stood a magnificent statue of a prince. The statue was known as the Happy Prince. It was covered in thin leaves of pure gold, had 2 bright sapphires as eyes, and a large, brilliant red ruby glowed in the hilt of his sword. The Happy Prince stood high above the city on a tall column, looking out over everything with a smile on his lips. The statue was adored by the city's inhabitants. They admired it daily, marveling at its beauty. However, no one realized that inside the statue was the true heart of a prince who once lived in the nearby palace. When the prince was alive, he never knew sorrow. He lived in luxury and pleasure, and his courtiers always called him the Happy Prince. Now, as a statue, he could see all the misery and suffering of the people in the city, and his heart was filled with sadness. One night, a little swallow flew over the city. Her friends had already left for Egypt, but she had stayed behind to court a lovely reed she had fallen in love with. When the reed showed no interest in traveling, the swallow decided to leave it and join her friends. She flew all day and night, and when she arrived in the city, she was tired and needed a place to rest. "I will rest here tonight," said the swallow, as she perched between the feet of the Happy Prince. As she was about to fall asleep, a large drop of water fell on her. "What a curious thing," she exclaimed. "There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are shining, and yet it is raining." Then another drop fell. The swallow looked up and saw that it was not rain, but tears falling from the Happy Prince's eyes. "Who are you?" asked the swallow. "I am the Happy Prince," the statue replied. "Then why are you crying?" asked the swallow. "When I was alive, I did not know what tears were," said the prince. "I lived in the palace of Sans-Souci, where sorrow was not allowed. My courtiers called me the Happy Prince, and indeed I was happy. Now that I am dead, they have placed me here so high that I can see all the ugliness and misery of my city. And though my heart is made of lead, I cannot help but weep." The swallow was filled with compassion and asked, "Is there anything I can do to help you?" "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Far away in a little street, there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman sitting at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has rough red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. She is embroidering flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of the queen's maids of honor to wear at the next court ball. In a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking for oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water, so he is crying. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, won't you bring her the ruby from the hilt of my sword? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move." "I am waited for in Egypt," said the swallow. "My friends are flying up and down the Nile and talking to the great lotus flowers. Soon they will go to sleep in the tomb of the great king. But I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger." "Thank you, little swallow," said the prince. So the swallow plucked the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew with it in her beak over the rooftops of the city. She passed the cathedral tower, where the white marble angels were sculpted. She passed the palace and heard the sound of dancing. A beautiful girl came out on the balcony with her lover. "How wonderful the stars are," he said to her. "And how wonderful is the power of love." "I hope my dress will be ready in time for the state ball," she replied. "I have ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, but the seamstresses are so lazy." She flew over the river and saw the lanterns hanging on the masts of the ships. She flew over the ghetto and saw the old Jews bargaining with each other and weighing money in copper scales. Finally, she came to the poorhouse and looked inside. The boy was tossing feverishly on the bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. She was so tired. The swallow hopped in and laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Then she flew gently around the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with her wings. "I feel so cool," said the boy. "I must be getting better." And he sank into a delicious slumber. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what she had done. "It is curious," he remarked, "but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold." "That is because you have done a good deed," said the prince. And the little swallow began to think, and then she fell asleep. Thinking always made her sleepy. When day broke, she flew down to the river and had a bath. "Tonight I go to Egypt," said the swallow, and she was in high spirits at the prospect. She visited all the public monuments and sat for a long time on top of the church spire. Wherever she went, the sparrows chirped and said to each other, "What a distinguished stranger." So she enjoyed herself very much. When the moon rose, she flew back to the happy prince. "Have you any commissions for Egypt?" she cried. "I am just starting." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "won't you stay with me one more night?" "I am waited for in Egypt," answered the swallow. "Tomorrow my friends will fly up to the second cataract. The hippopotamus lies there among the bulrushes, and on a great granite throne sits the god Memnon. All night he watches the stars, and when the morning star shines, he utters one cry of joy, and then he is silent. At noon the yellow lions come down to the water's edge to drink. They have eyes like green barrels, and their roar is louder than the roar of the cataract." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in a glass by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. His hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are red as a pomegranate, and he has large and dreamy eyes. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but he is too cold to write any more. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint." "I will wait with you one more night," said the swallow, who really had a good heart. "Shall I take him another ruby?" "Alas, I have no ruby now," said the prince. "My eyes are all I have left. They are made of rare sapphires, which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago. Pluck out one of them and take it to him. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy food and firewood and finish his play." "Dear prince," said the swallow, "I cannot do that." And she began to weep. "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince. "Do as I command you." So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew away to the student's garret. It was easy enough to get in, as there was a hole in the roof. Through this she darted and came into the room. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. And when he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets.